Okay, so this morning I'm going to transfer my drawing onto the canvas that I prepared for it. And I'm going to use a few different kinds of materials for that. I've got some tracing paper and a plumb line with me. But let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm going to take my transfer paper and I'm actually going to put it over the top of my transfer drawing. I'm going to use some masking tape to kind of tape a couple spots along the top of the stretcher bars. And then I'm just going to smooth that down with my hand. Maybe take a little piece of tape and tape it in a small area on the bottom so that it stays kind of affixed to the drawing. And then I'm going to go ahead and just trace out every little bit that I think is important to kind of transfer onto the canvas. So what you can see from the kind of simplicity and breadth with which I've outlined the figure, that a lot of the information that I kind of extracted from observation is actually being kind of left behind in the transfer drawing itself. It is not going to be technically, literally transferred onto the surface of the canvas. That being said, I want to remind you that all of the things that we found during that process are not lost. We really assimilated those. I have a strong kind of working visual vocabulary for this pose in this model now, and that is going to be the thing that really informs my initial block-in as much as the actual technical lines on the canvas that I transfer. Something else I want to mention here is that we need to ensure that the gravity and the verticality of the pose that I studied throughout the course of the entire time that I spent drawing is something that I want to preserve when I transfer it onto the painting. It would be very easy for me to take this transfer paper off of my paper canvas, put it onto my linen canvas, and it would be crooked or would in some way kind of alter the overall balance of the pose. With that in mind, I'm going to use my plumb line actually to mark a perfect vertical at the top and bottom. And when I affix this transfer paper to my canvas, I'm then also going to adjust it to hit that same perfect vertical so that I can be ensured that between these two surfaces, I'm going to achieve the same kind of tilt to the pose from a top to bottom perspective. So now I've taped the tracing onto my linen canvas, and I've put the part that I traced facing the linen. So what I need to do now actually is to rub over the lines that I made on the back side of the tracing paper with a really, really soft charcoal, so that when I flip it back over and put the charcoal side onto the linen, I can then retrace my drawing and it will leave an imprint on the linen. Okay, so I've lined up those marks that I made with the plumb line with the ones that I had on my tracing paper. And so the canvas and the paper are now aligned along that vertical axis. And I can go ahead and actually trace this drawing out and leave my final imprint on the linen. Okay, now that I've traced out all the lines that I had on my paper, or at least I think I have, it's a really important step is to actually kind of take the bottom tape off of your canvas and actually just double check that you did actually trace over all the lines that you left. Because I did the first tracing in pencil and I did the second pass in pencil as well, it's possible that I could have missed a line. In fact, I just noticed one that I did miss. I'm just going to reinforce a couple of the lines with graphite, just so I know that I can see them clearly enough. Okay, that should be sufficient for me to get the figure painted onto the canvas, at least for the initial underpainting. And that concludes the transfer drawing section.